are still in the portal. It's actually over 10% of the people that sat either on the bench or played in games this year are now sitting in the portal. Wow, why is that becoming a thing? I don't know.
So what is the
Portal.
porter? Is that
I don't
Irish?
know.
Is that Irish for something?
It's the Irish golf transfer portal. Well, I can't even make the joke. This could go downhill quick. I don't know what's happening.
It's time for the Brew and Shavers Sports Podcast.
Hey there, sports fans. We're so glad that you're back with us for another episode. I'm joined again by my co-host, Darren. Darren, how you doing?
Doing well. We're getting, we're right into Omaha. We're coming off the wave of March Madness, and I just want to say a quick hello to Alabama, Tennessee, and LSU fans. Hey, guys, we love you. That's that's not pandering, is it? That's not.
No, not at all. We are glad for all fans of every SEC team, but in particular, some fans show up a little bit more than others, and
that's right.
And maybe that has to do with the subject matter for each episode. But we're glad whoever you root for in the SEC, or if you don't even root for an SEC team and you still watch or listen to the show, we're glad to have you as a part of this show.
Absolutely.
Remember to hit that like button, that subscribe button, so you get notified every time new episodes drop and anything extra is released, which we tend to do at various times throughout the year. Darren, we got a lot of sports to talk about, but I got to start with the news of Dickie Betts, founding member, one of the founding members of the Allman Brothers Band, passing away on Thursday, April 18th at the age of 80. One of the great guitarists. I think Rolling Stone had him at like number 58 on the top 100 of all time. But he wrote such great songs. Like, you probably recognize this one, Darren.
Oh, yeah.
He wrote it. He sang, played guitar on it. He also gave us great songs like Jessica and In Memory of Elizabeth Reed. So a big, big loss. When you think about Southern rock, Darren, everything goes back to the Allman Brothers. You look at every group that's come since then, they owe so much to the Allman Brothers. So I hated to hear that news. Sad day for music.
Yep.
That's all you got to say. Yep.
Well, I mean, you're right. It's such a sad day. And I mean, like I said, when you were talking earlier, truly one of the greats. I mean, those are some fantastic songs. And even on songs that you don't necessarily might not be one of your, even if there are some Allman Brothers songs that aren't huge hits that people are like, oh my goodness, that's, if you sit back and listen to them, the guitar playing and the stuff, truly incredible.
You know what else is sad, Darren? So yesterday at church, I saw my co-host from a distance, and I thought, oh, I'm going to go over there and say hello to them, because my daughter told me, hey, her daughter, my granddaughter, saw you and recognized
me. I got a high five. Yeah.
She was excited. So I'm like, I'm going to go talk to Darren, my co-host, my buddy, and you were gone. What was that about?
I mean, when your granddaughter recognized me and gave me a high five, I had peaked. I didn't really, I mean, I was, it's kind of the George Costanza. I'm good. I'm going on a high note. We just headed to the car. We were, what else is going to happen to my day? I mean, I was in pretty good shape at that point.
I was like, what does one podcast say to another one in church? I guess absolutely nothing.
That's what, no.
We did say we have some sports to talk about tonight, so let's get right into it. Congratulations to LSU Gymnastics for winning their first ever national championship, and it could not come at a better time. LSU needs a win right now. So thank you, ladies, for the gymnastics national championship. It gives us something to find comfort and to celebrate in.
Something that's not baseball to talk about this season.
Yeah.
It's been a little rough.
I think it's going to be rough for a little bit.
Yeah.
So anyway, in other sports news, the NCAA board has issued some rulings, Darren, and you are up to date on what are some changes for this upcoming season in college sports, college football in particular.
Yeah, especially college football, because it just seems to be that everything that kind of came down, that at least the headline stuff, was really centered around college football. Last year they started the process of the clock would only stop for a first down or after a first down in the last 2 minutes of each half. Well, this year they've decided what they'll do to, I guess, kind of create that line where you know exactly when it's going to start to happen. Is there will now be 2-minute warnings at the end of each half, just as there is in the NFL. So going into getting to the 2-minute mark, you'll have a 2-minute warning, and then from that point forward, at each first down, the clock will stop. Also, another change that's going to be very, very similar to the NFL game is helmet comms and tablets are officially in. So those will now be something that will be available that teams will have access to. It's going to be interesting to see. I think when you think about like a Tennessee or somebody like that, I can see this being an enormous advantage. But some of your slower teams or slower pace teams that are more traditional huddle teams, I mean, you won't have to worry about signals, but it's going to be interesting to see how the teams use this to their advantage, especially the helmet comms. I think the tablets and being able to really have instant feedback and be able to break things down will be to an advantage for everyone. Then also, and here's the big one when it comes to transfers and stuff that we've talked about, and everybody honestly has talked about over and over again. But the NCAA took another step. A while back, they made the decision that you can transfer once. And outside of that, if you transfer a second time, you have to set out a year. They called it a year in residence, unless you are a graduate transfer. And then it was West Virginia and somebody else, a couple of places sued, saying that shouldn't be the case. There was an injunction placed. Well, I guess the NCAA decided if there's going to be an injunction, it's probably not going to go in our favor. So we'll just go ahead and eliminate the issue. So going forward, multi-year transfers or multi-time transfers, can be immediately eligible regardless of first, second, third, whatever, however many times they've transferred, if they are in good standing, which is from a discipline perspective with the school that they're transferring from, if they meet academic eligibility requirements of the NCAA, and if they meet progress toward degree requirements of the NCAA. So as long as you're in good standing, you're academically eligible to play according to the NCAA, and you're working toward a degree, you're meeting those benchmarks, I guess you can transfer every year on the year as soon as you're finished, and you're still good to go. I have 8,000 opinions, but nothing that we haven't talked about before. But to me, there's a little bit of counterintuitive to this. If somebody can transfer from a school every single year and start looking at it basically as soon as the season, especially like a football season, is over with, how long is it going to take before those two things butt heads, where there is no academic eligibility because you're taking, summer courses and 10 weeks worth of classes, and then you're moving on. Those things are going to start to butt heads eventually as well. But as of now, those are the rules for transfer eligibility. As long as you meet those standards and or benchmarks, you can transfer and be immediately eligible.
I wonder, Darren, if we're going to see a change in the way that coaches recruit athletes. If you have a high risk athlete who you're rolling the dice, they very likely, with whatever past history or red flags that recruiters, they could move on. Do you take a risk of investing in that athlete for a year, knowing there's a good chance they're going to be out the door? Or do you go for guys who you think that they're going to have a higher threshold in terms of their commitment?
Well, when you consider the resources that are involved in recruiting high school athletes especially, and now yes, we see more and more with the transfer portal. I mean, recruitment is just every year 24/7 kind of thing for every level. You would think at some point that will have to become a coach's mentality, because and I apologize that I can't remember the school, but there was a 4 or 5-star recruit that was an early enrollee, committed in December, enrolled in classes starting in January, finished up spring practice this past week, and has entered the transfer portal. So 2 years worth of recruiting and everything that's involved from January to April 22nd is how long that person was on. I mean, literally, as the old saying is, a cup of coffee on campus, all of those resources completely down the drain. And now that you don't have to have that year in residence, as long as you're eligible, you can transfer. I mean, what's going to stop that from becoming more and more the case? So I think coaches are going to have that mentality that you're talking about at some point, varying levels maybe, but at some point it's going to have to be part of the conversation.
I imagine we're going to see a change. It made me think, I'm not sure how well this fits, but for some reason it made me think of a quote from Mike Tomlin, the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We want volunteers, not hostages. And so there's a sense that some of these athletes are holding universities hostage.
Absolutely.
You meet my demands or I'm going to go elsewhere. And I wonder if coaches, if they get any inkling of that kind of perspective or attitude, they may just move away from an athlete and to others that are out there.
To me, I think it's going to be a logical step. How wide, how many coaches, but I think there's going to be a segment of coaches that it's a logical step, because it becomes about, when everything is so transactional and NIL related, I hate to put these terms when we're talking about 18 to 22-year-old kids that hopefully are looking for a degree, but it also becomes about ROI at some point. When you put 2 years worth of resources into somebody for them to be off campus in 4 months or 8 months or 14 months, that's a whole lot of resources that are just gone. And there's nothing you can do about that. So I think that's, like you said, that has to be a part of the conversation, where we've got these 2 guys that are pretty close, fit our system, but there's just something when you talk to teachers, when you talk to whoever, that feels like this guy might be the person, this guy or girl, depending on the sport, that might be a person that after a year doesn't go exactly where they want, they're just going to move on. So maybe we should go ahead and do that now.
Yeah. Speaking of the transfer portal, what are the numbers looking like right now, Darren?
I didn't even get into exact numbers because just those percentages are astounding. So I wanted us to at least to at least share those. As of right now, 10% of college basketball D1 college basketball players are still in the portal. It's actually over 10% of the people that sat either on the bench or played in games this year are now sitting in the portal. Wow, why is that becoming a thing? I don't know.
What is the porter? Is that Irish? Is that Irish for something?
It's the Irish golf transfer portal. Well, I can't even make the joke. This could go downhill quick. I don't know what's happening. But an equally as astounding number, if I can get this correct, is in the past 4 days, from Friday till Monday of recording time, in the past 4 days, 10% of D1 college football players have hit the transfer portal. So thank you. 10% of those that were in a spring practice are now looking for a different team.
That's some resilience, Darren. You were going to say that word. You were going to keep saying that word until you got it right. Kids, if you're watching this show, don't ever give up on your dreams. Remember,
That's right.
Darren, he refused to give up until he could pronounce portal correctly.
2 times in, I could have chosen to hit the transfer portal, but I didn't. I kept going.
Well done. Well done. Speaking of football news, did you notice? I know this is a little off track, off script here, but Paul Finebaum was in Norman this weekend for the Oklahoma spring game.
I tell you what, that's interesting that he ended up there. I guess he wanted to give them the full welcome to the SEC experience, because I did notice, in addition to that, I heard a couple of different podcasts over the weekend, or I guess over the last couple of days since the Oklahoma spring game, talk about how weird it was to see the Oklahoma, and there's no Big 12 anywhere on, the logos aren't on the field. The Big 12 teams, they used to have the teams at the end of the stadium, the flag for each, those were gone. It was just red and white flags. So it's really kind of an odd feel, that first kind of inkling of, wait a minute, this looks weird. So I guess Finebaum wanted to, here it is. Here comes the SEC experience for you.
And Finebaum will be back in Norman on July 1st to his show we broadcast live there to welcome Oklahoma officially to the SEC. And this is so cool that it's actually becoming a reality, Darren.
Absolutely.
OU fans argued for the Big 12 for years. Now I love how they're all saying SEC's best conference. SEC's the best conference. And I think they're going to fit in, Darren. I watched a little bit of the spring game, which of course is Oklahoma announcers, and they actually brought up at one point how they've heard people saying, is OU ready for the SEC? And they said, well, the question we're asking around here is the SEC ready for OU? So they're already talking smack, which you have to be able to talk a lot of smack to make it in the SEC. So I think they're going to be just fine.
I agree. I think Oklahoma and Texas are going to roll right in, and it's going to be just the level of competition alone and the smack talk that'll create. What is go ahead, take over. I don't really know. It's going to be fun. It's awesome that it's coming to be. It just, even though you don't think you could get more excited about the next football season, we've got even more to be excited about, which is pretty awesome.
It is going to be a lot of fun.
Yep.
We've got a lot more to talk about today, but first, let's go ahead and pause for this week in sports history.
April 23rd, 1869, the first professional baseball game is played. The Cincinnati Red Stockings, precursors to today's MLB Cincinnati Reds, take on the amateur Great Westerns of Cincinnati. The outcome was decisive. The Red Stockings triumphed with a 45-9 victory led by the Wright brothers, Harry and George Wright, not the aviation pioneers. The Red Stockings embarked on a groundbreaking journey. Their 57-game road trip across the nation marked the birth of professional baseball. Remarkably, they emerged victorious in every single contest that year. George Wright, hailed as baseball's first superstar player, wielded a mighty bat, boasting a .633 batting average and smashing 49 home runs during that remarkable streak. The Red Stockings were the first team that dared to embrace professionalism in sport. Their audacity transformed baseball into a national sensation, leaving an indelible mark on the sport's history.
Oh, thank you.
Let's jump right into the latest AP Top 25 SEC. Well, not SEC, but it might as well be the SEC poll.
Exactly.
The SEC is still prominently featured in the top 25. The
Absolutely.
Aggies from A&M, Darren, you were talking about them last week. Man. What a solid team they have, and what a great season up to this point.
Yeah, and there is no indication that it's going to be anything but a great season for them, because when you got the combination of bats and power on the mound, well, not just power, but proficiency on the mound that they do, I can pull off proficiency, but not portal. Anyway, that they do on the mound, somebody is going to have to catch them in a winner take all kind of match, wherever that be, whatever round that is in postseason, and just catch one of their pitchers having a bad day. That's the only way something happens to their season, because, man, they just seem unstoppable.
Following them at number 2, the Razorbacks from Arkansas. Is this part of the Calipari effect? That no, they were doing good already before.
Yeah. Kentucky fans might say it is, because once they named him head coach in basketball, they dropped down a slot in baseball, and so Kentucky fans might say it is the Calipari effect.
Did you see the story that supposedly Jerry Jones said he would double NIL for a recruit? Double what they were being offered by Kentucky if they'd come to Arkansas. Was that a legit story?
I've seen people talk about the story, but haven't really seen much on. So I don't know if it's, but I mean, that sounds very Jerry Jones like, if we just want to be honest about it. That's not something that makes you go, oh, that seems weird. No, that seems pretty on par. So it wouldn't surprise me.
It surprised me because it was basketball. I would think it would be football, but who knows?
Yeah.
No, Tennessee at number 3, Kentucky at number 4. They had a great series this weekend with the Vols coming out, and they look tough as always.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, talk about, just like we talk about A&M climbing up to that number 1 spot, Tennessee has not had many dips in the road this year once we started conference play, and they've had some time that conference play maybe didn't go exactly the way they wanted it to in past seasons under Vitello, but boy, that does not seem to be the case this year. They have really, it's like they're hitting their stride. If you're a Tennessee fan, it's like they're hitting their stride at the right time and just seem to be climbing. We've got some very interesting series looking at this top 4, or actually all of the top 25 coming up the last few weeks of the conference schedule.
The Tennessee coach's name is
Tony Vitello, I believe. Is that right?
I know that, but every time I think of that, for some reason, I think of Michael Corleone.
You know what? I would be willing to bet, with his personality, if you got one-on-one with him, he could give you a Corleone impression. I could guarantee that he could pull that off.
Do you think he'd do a better Michael or Vito?
Oh, you know what? Tennessee fans would probably tell you he could do both well. That's what they believe in everything he does right now.
I'd like to hear him say, "I'm going to make you an offer." I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
I can guarantee you it's been used. Guarantee it's been used.
Or what was the one that Michael says to his brother Frito? I know it was you, Frito.
Yeah, I know it was you, Frito.
You broke my heart.
Yeah. Now I'm going to have to watch that movie. All right, let's keep going.
Kentucky at 4, Vanderbilt at number 11. Darren, how you feel about that?
You know, after the way the A&M series went, to be at 11, just outside the top 10, and have a series win over Florida this past weekend, even though Sunday, I wasn't really happy with Sunday. At this point in the season, as beating up on each other the entire conference schedule has been for just about everybody outside of A&M and to some extent Tennessee, I'll take it. It's not a bad position to be in.
I think LSU's taking a lot of the beatings. I'm not sure they're beating up on anybody right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's the case.
Oklahoma 18, Georgia at 20,
yep.
Alabama at 23, and South Carolina at 24. There are your SEC teams in this week's top 25. Well, we got some more baseball news, though, Darren.
Yeah, I wanted to run through it when looking at rankings. In addition to rankings, I want to just look at projected host or regional host, and it really just want to kind of look at, we've got several SEC teams that are projected to be regional hosts, of course, A&M, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, all obviously projected to be hosts. South Carolina is in there at a potential 12 seed. And this is all according to Baseball America. But I found it interesting looking at this, who they have. Typically the top 8 that they project to be regional hosts, they also see as being potential super regional host if they win their region. And of note is the fact that A&M, of course, is the number 1 seed overall regional host, which will be a super regional. Arkansas is at 3, Kentucky is at 5, Tennessee is at 6. So you've got those top 4 places, or top 4 in the top 25 are also in the top 8 of regional hosts, which would project them to be, or projected regional hosts, which would project them to be super regional hosts as well. So if you are an A&M, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky fan, that's a pretty, because these guys, Baseball America, nobody's perfect because it's all projection, but they usually do a pretty good job and get pretty close at what it's going to look like in the postseason. Those are some really, really nice projections if you're part of those fan bases to be in that top 8, where not only do you, it looks like you're going to host your regional, but you win your regional as obviously you're expected to do, and you're going to be hosting a super regional, which is a nice piece of the puzzle when it comes to getting Omaha. So some really good news at this point in the season, but according to Baseball America and their projections, it looks really nice for those schools, especially.
SEC is still in the mix of things, and I think they're going to be in the mix to win yet another championship in Omaha.
Absolutely. It's going to be exciting to see how many are there.
No doubt about it. Let's talk a little bit about spring football, Darren. We mentioned, I kind of jumped the gun with Finebaum being in Norman. That was one of the spring football games, but who else had some games this past weekend?
Well, as you mentioned, Finebaum was in Oklahoma in Norman at their spring game, and I tell you, the one of the big things that came out of that was Jackson Arnold, the QB, seems to be as advertised. Really stood out. That was the big takeaway from Oklahoma. Their running backs look strong. So those were all positive things, and their D line stood out a little bit as well. Probably, or most likely not as much as a lot of people would have liked for them to really kind of show some form of domination, especially in the spring game, but still they looked good. Texas A&M, the scary thing is you change head coaches, and the kind of the thoughts and conjecture or feelings rather coming out of the spring game feel very familiar. Defense looked good, offense, So that's if I'm an A&M fan, that's a little scary because I'm really, really tired of hearing that over the last several years. But that's kind of be expected when you have a complete and total scheme change on both sides of the ball. Defense typically catches on a little bit quicker than offense. So it's not a, ring the alarm, oh my goodness, what have we done? But still kind of get your attention a little bit. And I believe his name was Nick Scortum, who transferred from Purdue, is an edge rusher. Looked like a beast. He was one of the people that everybody came out of the game talking about. South Carolina defense looked improved. Offense was, made vanilla ice cream say, man, that looks plain. So part of it is because it's a spring game, and that's part of what's to be expected. You're not going to come out, but still there's spring game plain. And then there's, I don't know what just happened. And that's kind of where South Carolina's offense was. So that'll be interesting. In contrast to that, Mississippi State, everybody is talking about Jeff Levy's offense. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, is all the reaction. Defense has a way to come. It really is kind of the opposite of what we just talked about. Offense seems to have caught on pretty quickly. Defense is struggling a little bit. But with some of the pieces they had in place and the transfers they brought in, that's not overly surprising. And the fact that he's kind of the offensive genius that he is. So that's not overly surprising. One of the big headlines coming out of spring games this past Saturday, it will not be surprising if there is a quarterback controversy this year in Austin. because first play from scrimmage, Quinn Ewers throws a interception that is run back for a touchdown. That was the first offensive play of the spring game. In contrast, Arch Manning was 19 of 26, 355 yards, and threw his first incompletion, which most people classified as still a catchable ball, but nonetheless, it was an incompletion with 12 seconds to go in the first half. He almost went perfect for the entire first half of the game. I think he had 3-4 touchdowns. Here's the thing. Texas is committed to Quinn Ewers. Sarkisian was very clear about that in his post-game comments. However, Quinn Ewers has missed games in every single season because of injury. Arch Manning comes in relief, which he is known. It's very clear that he is the backup this year, even though they do have another freshman, or they have a freshman that they're pretty excited about. They got some good spring game play. He is known as the backup. 3-4 games into the season, 5 games in the season, Quinn Ewers goes out. Arch Manning comes in, has a 29 of 37 for 398 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no picks. We've got a conversation in Austin. And so I feel like that's one of the big headlines that's going to come that came out of this weekend is, even though it was a spring game, Arch Manning looked as advertised. And when you contrast that to the very first pass being an incompletion return for a touchdown, there's already conversation, and it's just going to intensify. Quinn Ewers needs to come out of the gate swinging when football starts, when fall camp starts. But even if he does, if there's injury, it's going to be a conversation in Austin for sure.
It did spark a lot of discussion, Darren, but it is a spring game.
Right. Absolutely.
Quinn Ewers has the experience. He's a competitor. I think the job is his.
Absolutely.
To your point, however, the job was once Drew Bledsoe's.
Exactly.
And he went out with an injury, and that opened the door for Tom Brady. And
that's who.
You've heard of him, right? Yeah. And that's not the only time that's happened.
Oh, no, not at all.
That could very well happen here as well. So
yeah,
a lot to watch. And there's been a groundswell of people wanting Arch Manning to get the starting position. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes in Austin.
Yeah, there will be a lot of conversation. That's for sure.
Let's move from spring football to the NBA. We don't normally talk about the NBA, but the playoffs have kicked off, and that got us looking at all the SEC players that are on rosters of playoff teams. And we have in excess of 50 SEC players on rosters. That's phenomenal, that's awesome. Darren.
Absolutely. That's incredible to have that many when you're down to the playoffs, and to have that many SEC players still active in the league on these playoff rosters is really incredible, and says a lot about the strength of the league right now.
Yeah, I saw the kid from Florida Atlantic. It was announced today he's transferring to Florida, and one of his statements was he wanted to play in the best conference. Come a long way, baby.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, you and I, just to kind of throw this number out there, you and I were talking before we started recording. What does that list, even though we don't have an exact number, what does that list look like 10 years ago? Are there 50-plus players playing on NBA playoff rosters from the SEC 10 years ago? I don't think so. I mean, I still enjoyed watching SEC basketball then, but when you look at what the league looked like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, compared to today, or what the conference looked like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there is no way the number is that high with that many. You've got Kentucky guys, obviously, that are going to be playing in the NBA. And then you've got some one-offs here and there outside of like Florida and maybe Arkansas. You've got some one-offs here and there, but you don't have 55 players across multiple teams. In the list that we talked about, there were guys from Missouri that are playing on an NBA roster in the playoffs right now. Not 10 years ago. Guarantee not 10 years ago. That's not going to be the case.
These are exciting times, and they're just going to get better if you're an SEC fan. As all across the board, we see SEC dominating, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, gymnastics. You can't really go to any poll and not find the SEC's presence.
Absolutely.
Well, that's about a wrap for tonight, Darren.
I think we've covered quite a bit. I mean, we talked baseball, we talked football, we talked NBA, we basketball, we talked gymnastics.
We talked about ignoring your co-host at church.
And we talked about the Allman Brothers. I mean, we covered a pretty good.
We appreciate you watching another episode. If you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening to it via podcast on your favorite platform, however you choose to watch or listen, we appreciate you so much. Hit that like button, that subscribe button, get notified. New episodes drop typically every Tuesday, unless there's a major sporting event on a Monday night and we back it up to a Wednesday. But we appreciate you. We really do. And we love talking about sports, and we love that you are part of this.
Absolutely.
So thank you. And until next week, y'all take care.
Have a great week.
Thank you for making the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast your go-to sports show. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our show if you haven't already. Your feedback is so important. Let us know what you think about this week's show. Send an email to brewandshavers@gmail.com or a text to our text line 318-390-3599. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again for listening to the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast. See you next week.